Well, thank you so much, everybody, for joining us tonight. Oh, please, if you don't mind, just staying on mute. Thank you so much for joining us on a Thursday night. It's definitely turning out to be a cold one. My name is Kristen Volchansky. I am with Action Together NEPA. I'm a political and advocacy organizer for Action Together. And for the last several months, we've been very, very privileged to work with a lot of local residents who live in the Nacero, Newport Township, and Glen Lyon area, as well as some wonderful people from organizations such as PA Interfaith Power and Light and the Unitarian Universalist Church of Wyoming Valley. And we really wanted to put together a forum tonight that would be for the community, that would give members of the community a chance to gain more information about this proposed natural gas to gasoline refinery that is proposed to be built in Newport Township, right outside of Nanacoke, and to ask some questions about how it will affect their daily lives and their communities. So we have a lot of great stuff for you tonight, so I really want to get into the program. So I'm going to turn things over to Scott Cannon. Scott is a local filmmaker and a member of Action Together.
Thank you very much, Kristen. I've been documenting and interviewing people and their struggles with natural gas processing facilities for over 10 years now. The first video I'm going to show you are several local news stories on some of the issues that we've had with natural gas facilities over the past decade in Luzerne County.
A Luzerne County school board is united with parents opposed to a plan to build a natural gas compressor station near a school.
Having a gas compressor station in such close proximity to our campus is against the public safety and welfare.
There was a packed house at the Dallas School Board meeting tonight. A Texas-based gas and oil company wants to put the compressor about 1,000 feet from the Dallas area school complex, something parents and board members believe is risky.
It just makes no sense to put our treasure at jeopardy for this. It just makes no sense.
Gas from Wyoming and Susquehanna counties would be processed there. A zoning board hearing on the issue will be held this Wednesday at 7 p.m.
Candace and the Sanitary Authority hired a special lawyer to research this. For 2 years, they've been studying it, and tonight they got an earful, a room packed full of people lined up and down the walls. It felt like 85 degrees in there.
He wants to buy my house.
In what had already been a tense meeting.
What life do they have?
Strung with emotion and anger.
Would you put your children and grandchildren through this?
The debate over a possible frack water treatment plant in Hanover Township reduced to an out-of-control tirade.
You will not put that plant here. Period. Get it out of your heads, all of you.
As we
That's the end of it. No plant.
The chairman of the Wyoming Valley Sanitary Authority shut off public comment, triggering the outburst. He told me he was trying to keep the meeting to an hour because board members were getting fidgety about the complaints raised Tuesday night.
Same thing I've been hearing for the past couple of months. The people are concerned.
Frack fluid is the byproduct of the natural gas fracturing process. Wastewater is being churned out in millions of gallons in gas drilling country. Kenneth and Drew, people pleaded with the county zoning board to deny UGI's request to construct a compressor station in West Wyoming, and it appears members of the zoning board heard those pleas loud and clear.
To deny the special exception and variance by UGI Energy Services Incorporated.
I second that motion.
Denied. Zoning board members shoot down UGI Energy's plans for a compressor station. Their vote drowned out by a cheering crowd.
We can't thank everybody enough for what they've been doing for us. And I hope this is the end of it.
But still a hard-fought battle that last month sparked the longest zoning hearing ever was waged by neighbors.
I live right below it, so I'm happy.
Were you surprised?
Yes, I was surprised, but I'm happy it went our way.
Our homes are only 5,400 feet from that compressor, and we get the wind over that mountain. And if there's ever some kind of emission, we're going to get it first.
The residents of West Wyoming, they really didn't want this in West Wyoming. There was a lot of concern over the emissions and other issues with the project.
At tonight's Lake Township Supervisors meeting, the Township Supervisors made it very clear that they are not in favor of this facility.
It's going to be 300 feet from my front door. It's going to drop the property values.
Diane Pelosi didn't hold back when we asked her what she thinks of a proposed fracking water recycling facility in Lake Township.
If there's a problem, if there's a leak, if there's a spill, Harvey's Creek is right down below it.
She was one of many people who came to Wednesday night's Lake Township Supervisors meeting to let them know Lake Township isn't the place for it. Jerry Price was also at the meeting. As a resident and geologist, he also doesn't want to see the facility built.
As a professional, these facilities that I've worked with are mainly located on industrial areas, major traffic roads, a lot of highway access, and it just, in my opinion, is not a good place for the facilities.
I don't think there's anybody in the township who fully supports this whole concept.
Citing concerns for the environment and legal reasons, Township Supervisors agreed at Wednesday's meeting to send a letter to County Council asking them to deny the zoning request.
The idea of a recycling center or of an industrial waste treatment center, it's a great idea. It's just the wrong place to do it. It doesn't belong here.
No one from Waco was at Wednesday night's meeting, but Jerry Price thinks the decision supervisors made was the right one.
From a democracy, hey, most of the people feel they don't want it, and we feel the same way, so I'm really pleased with their decision tonight.
In addition to sending the letter to Luzerne County Council, the township supervisors here are urging residents to show up at the next zoning board meeting for Luzerne County on June 3rd.
Okay, so the first story that you saw there was about the natural gas compressor station at the Dallas high schools. That story didn't end there. The parents raised enough pressure about the facility that they decided to move it up the road about 4 miles from the schools, right across from the Beaumont Inn on Route 29. Some people protested, but not enough numbers showed up this time to really make any difference. Here's a video about what happened after that, from start to finish, the whole process. And it's a good indication of what's to come and what's to be expected from this Newport Township plant.
I'm Scott Cannon from the Gas Drilling Awareness Coalition. This video is about the residents living by a glycol dehydration station 15 miles west of Scranton, Pennsylvania. This station was built to remove water from the gas lines coming from the fracking operations in the northern counties. Folks here didn't know much about the gas up north, but some signed leases for a pipeline on their property, so the gas could flow through this station into the Transco pipeline to be distributed to the rest of the country. The millions of dollars the gas industry spends on ads did what it was supposed to do, and the lessers fell for it. Of course, they weren't told about the negative effects.
This is what I hear at 2 o'clock in the morning.
They kind of said, if I remember the one zoning meeting, that it was going to be put through no matter what.
But this hearing may be a bit of a futile. Act 13, which was passed by the legislature, supersedes most zoning with respect to oil and gas. And in this case, it makes what Chief has applied for a principal permitted use in an agricultural district.
The first red flag went up at the zoning hearing, when a representative from the company building the station told a concerned mother with asthmatic kids that the only emissions coming out of the proposed plant would be methane.
I had asked about a variety of different things, methane, benzene, the toluene or formaldehyde. None of those will be there, or?
Well, of course, methane will be there.
Well, yeah, that.
Yes.
But
the gas doesn't contain benzene.
Okay, no benzene, toluene?
Shouldn't have any in it.
And no. Formaldehyde?
No formaldehyde either.
A file review of the permit showed something else. Wilma Subra, a nationally renowned chemist and consultant, explains.
So this is a general permit, which is a minor permit, which now doesn't require a public notice or a public comment period. So you see the same type of chemicals we've been talking about, the volatile organics, and this is pounds per hour and tons per year, 1.48 tons. Nitrous oxide, which is a precursor to ozone, you see over 11 tons a year. Carbon monoxide, formaldehyde, a known human cancer-causing agent, total hazardous air pollutants, and particulate matter. And we saw lots of particulate matter today.
We were told that it would have two holding tanks above ground, one building, and a light. Everything else would be underground and invisible, and that's exactly not what's there.
There was to be no motor. It was a small facility, and there was going to be no motor at all. But they absolutely said there would be no motor. Like, there's a lot of buildings, and I don't think anybody around here really realized how big it was going to be.
My understanding is one of these was supposed to go up in West Wyoming, and it was denied because it's zoned A1 agricultural, which is what we are zoned here, so why was it permitted here?
At the end of September 2012, just less than a week after the station went online, an accident occurred.
It was probably about 11 o'clock in the morning on a Sunday, and we heard this really loud noise, and we looked out, and there was the stacks down there from the dehydration plant.
I opened the door, and there I hit me right smack right in my face. And here it was that their dehydrating plant up there, just spewing out gas all over the place.
And we looked out, and the horses were gone. They blew through that gate, the fence. They had the corner of the fence was all broke down. The gate was bent into like a U shape. It was just a really loud, sounded like fighter jets, pretty much, just hovering over the house.
Well, we had one horse out here in the back, and when that blew off down there, the horse got scared and ran through this gate. And it fell down and broke the PVC fencing, and busted that post and broke that post. The sheep that are across the road, they were just bouncing off the wire. I felt so bad for them, but you can't do anything until, the noise stops.
They told us that after the first time, they told us it would never go off again.
A month later, a louder, longer accident occurred.
Well, I was in bed, sleeping. It was before 3 o'clock in the morning, and all of a sudden I heard this roaring. I thought my house was ready to blow up.
And this was taken inside my house the morning of November 24th. I woke up at 2:54 a.m. and it went till 3:35 a.m.
It sounded like 10 747 jets ready to take off. I mean, the noise was deafening.
The second time, it was like a jet engine running for almost a half an hour or so. It was extremely loud. You couldn't hear yourself think. And I walked out the front door there. It was like 3 in the morning. I walked down the road, just not a few hundred yards, and I could see the gas shooting about 50 or 100 feet in the air. The Conkle Fire Department, they were all on the road, but they all stayed in the truck. I guess they weren't allowed to go down there. But it was like being on an aircraft carrier. That's what it sounded like.
The noise on it was unbearable. It just hurt my ears. It was so high pitched, and it was downright scary. I'm a Vietnam vet. I've been in the war zone. I was in the Marine Corps, and that there was downright scary.
The first time, like I said, the horses, we chased them about a quarter mile down the road before we finally got them, and they were all spooky. They were spooky for probably 2 weeks after that. The second time, they ran over and they hovered over into the corner. They knocked the fence down, but they must have got tangled in it and come back in. But they all hovered over in the corner next to one another.
There was a visible odor, and of course you could see the liquid shooting up in the air. My neighbor has said his whole home was engulfed by the smell.
My house was filled with, I don't know what it was, but my eyes was burning and my nose was running. I was going to open up the doors and the windows to get whatever was out, but I figured whatever was outside, it was more outside than it was inside, so I kept everything closed. There was a big cloud that came down after they shut it down over the plant, like a big fog. was all over the plant.
No one has informed us any danger that we're in or anything like that, and it was awful. It was an awful experience. And then when it shut off, then try to go to bed, try to go back to sleep was forget it.
Other problems are starting to surface.
Well, if you put your arm against this door like this, you'll feel it like a pulsation or a vibration that we never had before. Ever since the station's been up, but I was alarmed when it first happened. I thought I was going nuts, but here it's actually the door vibrating or pulsating.
And that's the station right out the window?
Yes, it is.
Besides being an eyesore and ruining a beautiful piece of property, there's a constant rumble that never goes away. It's like having an old furnace in an old house, just rumble, 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 24 hours a day. It never stops. And when they have the gas leaks, the noise is unbelievable. You don't know if you should run and hide or hunker down and wait for the big explosion.
Because of the constant vibration that is emitted by this station, the pictures on my wall vibrate, they shift. So every day I'm straightening them out. The mirror in my bathroom rattles. Whether sometimes when it's completely closed, sometimes if it's open just a little bit, there's a constant rattling.
Well, eventually, our plaster and drywall, that's all going to start to crack, and even in our home, the windows in our medicine cabinet rattle.
The neighbor up the road says her porch vibrates continuously. I mean, who wants to listen to that 24/7?
My house inside has a vibration to it, and plus I hear the roar of the whatever is roaring up there in my home.
In the past probably 2 or 3 weeks, my garage door does rattle from the vibration of the plant.
What about your septic and your water, your well and all that stuff? Is that affected by that too? By the vibration?
I'm worried about the safety to my family. What are we breathing in continuously that we weren't told? Certainly if they would lie to us about what was going to be placed above ground, they would lie to us about the chemicals that are being used in the processing of this station.
I'm an 8-year cancer survivor, and the emissions that come out of that are carcinogens, and I don't want to get cancer again of any kind.
I have a problem with headaches. They've been twice as worse since that station has been put here. I've had to double up on my medication.
I was diagnosed 3 years ago from the Veterans Administration Hospital. I have a lung disease, and I don't know if this is going to affect my lungs any more than what it is.
So what is the problem to me? What is the constant vibration? What is the smell? What's being released into the air that's affecting my health?
And then there's property values.
Well, it's probably depreciated by now. I mean, who'd want to buy a property here, and with that time bomb there,
I have grandchildren. I was going to will it to them when I passed on, but I don't know if they're even going to want it. And then try to sell it. I don't know what we can get for it.
I'm concerned about my property value. I wouldn't buy a place that was down the street from that, and I doubt that I'll be able to sell my home should I want to sell it. I'm paying full taxes on my property, whose now I'm sure has gone down in value. I don't trust the safety of the thing. I don't think it should be in an area where people live in residence.
Like I said, my wife and I, we put a lot of money and a lot of time in this place, and what we're going to get out of it, I don't know if we go to sell it.
Who's going to come here and look at my home and see that conglomeration right up the road and say, oh yeah, I want to buy that house?
In December 2012, a meeting was arranged between state and local officials and PVR partners, the facility's owners, to discuss the lack of a safety plan. PVR partners didn't show up, but the community leaders got a schooling on why you shouldn't build an industrial park in a neighborhood.
You don't know what that thing's going to do, what it's capable of doing or nothing. I mean, we saw the fire trucks up there and everything, and then I said to my husband, I said, how can he even give any direction to his men? You can't hear anything at all. And even someone mentioned to me that they were going to get together and have a siren. Well, that's ludicrous because nobody's going to hear the siren. It's just, you can't hear anything over that.
I don't like the way the emergency response is set up. Nobody seemed to know what to do the other night when we had that big blow up here. We were told they couldn't go near it, so what good is the fire company? They come and they stand down. They were all the way down the street here by us. So what's going to happen if the thing ignites? Who's going to protect my property? Who's going to protect the lives of my family? Nobody.
If there were something that Senator Baker or Representative Bobeck can do, what would that be?
Well, I would prefer the thing would be removed from here, but I think that the gas company should just buy us out. If that thing is here to stay, then buy me out.
I like the plant to shut it down. I mean, I don't think it should be here as close as all these people that we live right on top of this thing. This is a powder keg.
Oh boy, if they could shut it down, that would be super. But I think that I don't even know if we really want to live here.
Geez, lower our property taxes should be lowered. You know, I mean, some kind of restitution, I guess. You know, but buy us out. I don't know. You know.
I'd like to see the plant shut down now. They lied to us. It wasn't supposed to be this loud. I mean, we didn't have a clue what was going on. And I got a 17-month-old baby that's up around these horses. If my wife or my grandson's around them and that goes off, that's going to be a problem. And I had talked to them about it, but they were only worried about the gas they lost. That's all they were worried about.
Happening right now, an emergency response is going on in Monroe Township, Wyoming County. There are some reports of an unspecified release from a natural gas dehydration station. Our Joe Holden joins us now live over the phone with the very latest information. Joe, what can you tell us?
Hey, Janice, well, it's become very clear, whatever it is not being shared with the media. An Eyewitness News producer just called Wyoming County 911 within the last minute. They transferred that producer to Luzerne County 911. That 911 center previously told us that there had been a release from what's known as the Chapin Natural Gas Dehydration Station, which is just off Route 309 in Monroe Township, Wyoming County. That's known as the Beaumont area. It's just over the county line between Luzerne and Wyoming. And Luzerne County 911 previously told us that it was an undetermined, unknown, unspecified release from that station.
This morning we filed a 60-count complaint on behalf of 20 families that live in northern Luzerne County and southern Wyoming County, and whose lives have been greatly affected by a triethylene glycol dehydration plant. We've asked as damages from the gas company that they consider how they have destroyed the value of these people's homes, their quiet enjoyment of the properties, and the health concerns that they may have. Some have had numerous bloody noses since this has happened, skin rashes, headaches, ringing in their ears. So all of those things we're going to ask the court to look at. And again, this is not about being anti-drilling, it's being responsible as to how we drill, how we explore, and how we process the gas once it is drilled and explored.
I didn't move into the country to be looking at an industrial revolution right up the road from me. This is not supposed to be an industrial place. I could not move into an industrial zone as a residential person, so why should an industrial place be able to move into where people live? I mean, this is my home.
Okay, I'm going to note this is a very small plant. It's probably about 2 acres. In size. The Nacero plant that they're planning to build is on a 3,000-acre parcel of land. This particular video was used in a lawsuit that was mentioned in there, and the plaintiffs received an undisclosed settlement, but the residents had to sign a non-disclosure agreement and can no longer talk about the plant in public. This is standard procedure in any type of natural gas. Several residents seen in the video have since moved out, and several are still experiencing some health problems. Now, the Nacero plant that is proposed for Texas, which is like a sister plant, I'm going to see if I can share this screen. Hold on just one second. this particular plant, if it's going to be like the one in Texas, which we think it is, you can see that the nuisance and odor potential is listed as moderate, and the hazard potential is also listed as moderate. Just a couple of things now. After speaking with hundreds of people about their experience with natural gas processing facilities, here are some of the common takeaways. People are never made aware of what is coming and the problems that it will bring. People don't know what to do, or they don't know where to go for help. People assume that it's a done deal and there's nothing they can do, and that's just not the case. The problems with natural gas plants are always much more than they are being told. The plants almost always expand after they are built. Once they get the zoning permissions to build the plant, it's much easier to expand them afterwards. Right now in Turkmenistan, which is the home of the only other plant of this kind, that's already expanding after only 2 years of operation. And then these companies always come around and give money to the local fire departments and the community groups to buy their support. So, you know, you get a big donation to the fire company. How can you say anything against, you know, having one of these plants in your backyard? Right now, there are 2 new areas of concerns. The Bechtel Corporation, who was in charge of designing the Nacero plant in Texas, backed out with no explanation whatsoever. We tried to contact them several times, and we've got no response. So we don't know why this huge company, who was very good at what they do, backed out of this plant. And secondly, we're looking into the possibility of a mine fire near the site in Glen Lyon, near the Glen Lyon flagpole. And that's a major point of concern with this site. So in closing, if people choose to oppose this refinery as residents, you'd need to educate yourselves on the issues and organize, because if you choose to do nothing, these are the problems that you're going to be dealing with. So I thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Scott. Next, we're going to, our next speaker is Susan Voles. Susan Voles is with the Clean Air Council, and she has an extensive background in industrial air pollution and fracking as well. So Susan, please.
Thanks, Kristen. I'm sorry, I just want to say, to remind people, especially the new people have been coming on, to ask questions in the chat, and we're going to collect them and have a Q&A response at the end. Thank you, Susan.
Cool. Yeah, thanks. And thanks, Kristen and Scott. And thank you all for being here. I'm going to share my screen. So I'm going to be talking about the air pollution impacts from Nacero's, from this proposed gas to liquid refinery. Like Kristen said, my name is Susan Voles. I'm an advocacy coordinator with Clean Air Council. If you don't know about us, the Clean Air Council is a statewide member-based organization committed to protecting everyone's right to a healthy environment. We are the oldest environmental organization in Pennsylvania and serve the Mid-Atlantic region. Okay, so this is a quick overview of what I'll be talking about. I will give a little background on Nacero, the company, what the plant will do. I'll explain the gas to liquids process that you've heard a little bit so far, and talk about the emissions that we expect to see and ways that you can get involved. So who is Nacero? Nacero is a company founded in 2015. They are based in Houston, Texas, and they call themselves a provider of cleaner, low carbon gasoline. And this plant was announced between Nacero and local officials in October of 2021. And Nacero has 4 proposed plants, and you've heard a little bit about the one in Texas, but none of them so far are under construction or near the construction process. And one plant in Arizona was withdrawn with very little explanations to the community as to why that was happening. And as Scott also said, there's research that large-scale commercial gas to liquids plants aren't viable, aren't economically feasible. There's only one right now in the world in Turkmenistan, and it's expected that they will become less viable over time because we, need to be watching carbon emissions and as other forms of energy expand. So what is gas to liquids? It is a process where gas, which here would be fracked natural gas, is turned into synthetic gas called syngas. And that's a mix of hydrogen, carbon dioxide, and carbon monoxide. And then the syngas in this process would be turned into methanol, and the methanol gets turned into the gasoline. And methanol is a highly flammable chemical used mainly in fuels and pesticides. And Nacero, if you look at their website or if you listen to them, they use a lot of language about this being innovative technology and this being clean, new technology. But the methanol to gas process is not new. It's been in use since 1975 when Exxon created it as an alternative to an even older process. Once again, it's not a really viable process. There's only one commercial plant in the world in Turkmenistan. There's none in the United States. Nacero hasn't built any of the plants they've proposed to build. And so if we look at the permit from the Texas plants, the greenhouse gas emissions in 1 year would be equal to 1.5 coal plants. So what is the product and how clean is it really? Nacero talks about using or providing two types of gasoline, Nacero Blue and Nacero Green. Nacero Blue would come from fracked gas, and Nacero Green they describe as being made from gas collected from agricultural sites, landfills, and waste treatment facilities. But there are questions as to what would be the sources for this in Luzerne County? Like, where would they be getting all of this gas? And they say on their website anyway that they plan to put all of their gas sources together, which means that both products are going to include fracked gas. And you've heard mention of the Transco pipeline, which is near the proposed site as well. Nacero also hasn't provided any sort of data or a life cycle analysis, which looks at the entire process from when the gas is fracked to when it, going through the refining process, going to market, being used in a vehicle. There's no calculation of the environmental impact. So there's no source or data about how this is carbon neutral or how this is lower carbon the way they say it is. And we hear that the site in Luzerne will use solar, but again, is that feasible for the site? You've heard from Scott about some of the problems of the site itself. Can solar provide the energy necessary for this very intensive process? And so how clean is it really? The facility in Texas is the closest to construction, and Nacero filed a permit for that plant. And that's what you're looking at right here, the emissions summary. And you'll see this looks similar to what we saw in the video. And if the Luzerne Refinery is at all similar, which we expect it will be because the chairman of Nacero, Tom Tureen, said that they expect all the plants to be identical so they can just plop them across the country, then it would be the third highest source of greenhouse gas emissions and a huge source of air pollution in Pennsylvania. So there's a lot that we don't know about the Luzerne Refinery because they haven't filed these permits yet. But we do know that it will continue to use fracked gas. It's an intense process that creates a lot of emissions and then encourages more pollution. What are the pollutants that we're talking about? These are some of the biggest pollutants that we talk about when we talk about air pollutants. Carbon monoxide is a colorless, odorless gas created by the combustion process found in car engines, furnaces, and stoves. It's fatal at high levels. You know, most people have alarms in their homes. Sulfur dioxide comes from burning sulfur or materials that contain sulfur. Again, comes from burning fossil fuel in power plants and other facilities. Lead also comes from motor vehicles and industrial sources. I want to talk about a few in particular. Particulate matter, you heard in the video. Particulate matter are small bits of solid and liquid chemicals in the air. They come in different sizes. So, you know, smoke from a campfire is particulate matter, but the one of concern is this 2.5 micrometers. So that's the size. And as you can see in the picture, smaller than a human hair. It's invisible to the human eye. You can't see it. And unlike larger particles, the smaller ones can get through our natural, you know, defense systems in our bodies. We breathe them into our lungs. They get into the blood. They get into our organs. They cause heart and lung disease, and even short-term exposure can be dangerous. And they are a lot of sources are from vehicle emissions and power plants and factories and construction sites. I thought it was interesting in one of the videos that Scott played, the woman was talking about emissions, and the number she said for VOCs was 1.4 tons per year. The Texas plant, which again, we expect the Luzerne plant to be very similar to, is expected to emit 240 tons of particulate matter, 2.5 per year. And that doesn't even include the particulate matter of other sizes, but they have to specify for this size. And volatile organic compounds are another common air pollutant. They are a variety of chemicals that have long and short-term health effects. The oil and gas industry is the largest source of emissions. Some, like benzene, are carcinogenic. And again, the Texas plant is according to their permit, will emit over 600 tons per year. And then benzene is a volatile organic compound, and it's also considered a hazardous air pollutant, which is a group of toxic pollutants that cause health impacts such as cancer and birth defects. The EPA lists 188 different types of hazardous air pollutants, which include some VOCs. These are dangerous even at low concentrations, even from limited exposure. And the next speaker is going to talk about the health impacts, so I'm not going to talk a whole lot about them, but you heard some of them in the videos already: watery eyes, nosebleeds, trouble breathing, migraines, stuff like that. Then there's nitrogen oxides, which are a group of gases released from burning fossil fuels. They create particulate matter and ozone. And then again, the Texas permit estimates over 534 tons of nitrous oxides to be emitted per year. And then ozone is when the nitrogen oxides and other volatile chemicals react with heat. And they're very dangerous for children and people with asthma. According to the American Lung Association, they put out reports on air quality in different states. Luzerne County has a B rating for ozone, which isn't bad. So really, there's a real threat to the air quality from this plant. And who is at risk? This chart also comes from the American Lung Association. These are actual numbers of the population of people in Luzerne County who fit these categories. Air pollution isn't good for anybody, obviously, and even small amounts of exposure, small concentrations can be harmful, but we do know that some people are more affected than others. Children, the elderly, people with asthma, people who have had cancer or are immunocompromised or have other respiratory or, cardiovascular diseases. We know that people who are low income or people of color are more susceptible to health impacts from this kind of exposure. people who work outside, like construction workers, are all have a greater risk. And how you can get involved. You're going to hear from a lot of groups tonight. We can help you with facts about the refinery. We can help plug you into local groups. And if it gets that far, which we hope it doesn't, we can help you with the permit and commenting process to regulatory agencies, because there's usually a process for public comment when they submit permits. And that is all I have. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Susan. That was really informative. The next speaker we have, our final speaker, and then we'll get to the questions, is Barbara Brandon. Barbara Brandon is a retired physician, and now she is a member of Concerned Physicians of Pennsylvania. And just again, we ask you to put your questions into the chat, and we are collecting those, and we will get to them at the Q&A. Thank you, Barbara.
I'm a retired pediatric anesthesiologist, so I haven't given a lot of lectures in the recent past, although I attended a lot of Zoom lectures because I am very concerned about what's happening in our environment. So I tried to get one of my more facile, very experienced colleagues to speak tonight, but he really wasn't available. So I said, okay, I'll talk, because this is a problem that I feel very strongly about. I still haven't gotten my PowerPoint yet, but I'm working on it. I went to school in Philadelphia, to medical school, and where I was in college also was close to areas where there was petrochemical development. And I realized, I did have a stuffy nose. I did have chronic sinusitis. It wasn't life-threatening, so I just put up with it. When I moved to Pittsburgh, I said, oh, that smell is gone. But there was a different kind of pollution. I haven't gotten back to my PowerPoint yet. And that kind of pollution was the grit, the soot in the air that has been there from the steel industry forever. So I hope that we're not going to have petrochemical industry polluting us in Pittsburgh, but it looks like it's coming, because the Beaver power plant is just going into production this year, and it's going to make plastic out of that one with the blue writing. That I was an anesthesiologist at Children's Hospital for 35 years, but after I retired, I started studying these issues and went to a lot of Zoom meetings for all of these different groups listed below, especially the Better Path Coalition and Climate Reality Halt to Harm Network. But tonight I'm speaking on behalf of the Concerned Health Professionals of Pennsylvania. That's a small part of the Physicians for Social Responsibility that I renewed my commitment to when I retired. Could you go to the next one, Kristen? At the start of the COVID pandemic, my husband and I retreated to the country. The air feels cleaner under the trees. However, I pass fracked gas wells and compressor stations every time I drive to town for the groceries. Are there adverse health effects from living near a refinery? There certainly are. Next slide. We're very lucky that we have in our Pennsylvania Constitution a green amendment saying that people have the right to clean air, pure water, and preservation of our natural, scenic, and aesthetic values. This is really what we need to preserve for the benefit of all people and generations yet to come. I'm impressed that the Clean Air Council was active even before this constitutional amendment was passed in Pennsylvania. Probably they had a large part of the fact that it was passed. They probably supported the public relations necessary to get this through. Next slide. So as I mentioned, when I moved to Pittsburgh, it wasn't quite as bad as this, but I noticed the air pollution was different. Next slide. Different from what it had been in Philadelphia. And now this cracker plant in Beaver is upwind of us. We're downwind of it. Its pollution is going to come down into Pittsburgh and bring the problems that Philadelphia refineries have brought. The emissions profile of this Beaver cracker plant is quite similar to that of the proposed plant in Nacero. The same kinds of compounds and large volumes. So I said there were impacts on health. There certainly are. All these different lines, each line is a documented health effect from air pollution. Some of them were quite surprising to me. Of course, we expect we're going to cough, we'll have upper airway problems. Children with asthma will go to the ER more often when there's air pollution. But aside from just low birth weight, there's other effects on infant and child development and impaired fertility, dropped sperm counts, complicated pregnancies, all of these other issues. So prenatal exposure is very problematic. Some forms of childhood cancer have been linked to the presence of airborne chemicals during pregnancy and early infancy. And then recently, there's more work showing links between air pollution and the development of obesity, type 2 diabetes. You know, we think that's all diet related. Well, it's pollution related also. Dementia, anxiety, depression, and other forms of mental illness. That's really pretty scary. We never thought that it was air pollution that would be promoting these illnesses. A recent study by researchers at Pittsburgh showed that living in areas with the highest air pollution is associated with increased risk of cerebral vascular accidents or stroke in people with common heart condition called atrial fibrillation. So there's lots of things that go together, but it's not going to help our health. And as Susan mentioned, components of air pollution can cause cancer. That PM 2.5 has been associated with lung cancer and bladder cancer and increases the risk of other cancers also. Probably 9 million people a year worldwide die prematurely each year as the result of air pollution. Air pollution is driving a global epidemic of premature death. Next slide, please. As discussed in the Toxic Tuesday emails of January 25th, 2022, from the Center for Health, Environment, and Justice, we know a great deal about the mechanism of action of some chemicals. Scientists can predict what symptoms to expect, as we were mentioning before, the upper airway congestion symptoms, nosebleeds after acute exposure. And we know about some symptoms or disease processes with chronic exposure too, which I will get into in a minute. But it's rare that we can predict a health outcome knowing a toxic exposure. For example, this woman is standing in front of some air pollution. I can't even see the middle of the stacks there. She's doing something to help herself with that mask, but is it enough? Probably not. Furthermore, individuals are exposed to multiple toxic chemicals at one time, and they have very repeated exposures over the years. Next slide, please. The Global Burden of Disease Study is an annual report with hundreds of contributors. They estimated that in 2019, 4 million deaths were attributable to particulate air pollution. The Air Quality Life Index of the University of Chicago put the toll air pollution takes on humans into perspective by saying these things. Alcohol use reduces life expectancy by 9 months. Unsafe water and sanitation, 7 months. At that point, conflict and terrorism, they estimated only 7 days. We hope it stays like that. The impact of particulate pollution on life expectancy is comparable to smoking. That's not a surprise. I mean, smoking is giving you these particulate matter and some other other toxic substances also. And that expected effect on decreased life expectancy from particulate matter is similar to that for smoking. 3 times more problem than alcohol with drug use and unsafe water. Next slide, please. So spikes in PM 2.5. I'm glad that Susan showed you what PM 2.5 looks like. It's so small. It can get into your lungs, as she said, and to your blood and go throughout your whole body. The PM 10 will probably get stuck in your nose, but the 2.5 gets into your body. So in Cincinnati, they knew that there were spikes in PM 2.5 from time to time. And this is common with many different forms of air pollution. They're not always at the same level as Mr. Cans showed in those early videos. When a disaster happens, like an explosion, then everything goes up way high. I'm glad we saw the Clairton Coke Works, because when there was a fire in the Clairton Coke Works, everything went up very high. And one of the speakers in a different forum talking about that said that over the course of time after those fires at Clairton Coke, people got 10 to 13 years worth of air pollution. So Cincinnati Children's Hospital wanted to study it. They're very, very interested in all kinds of things. They looked at the spikes. They looked at their emergency room visits for children with mental diagnoses. We might say, oh, everybody's anxious. Many people are depressed. That's not surprising. But you think of bipolar disorder, suicidality, schizophrenia as real medical problems. And certainly they do bring terrible impact. If you've ever lived with someone with one of these disorders, you can appreciate that. So at Cincinnati Children's Hospital, they examined 6,800 records of children less than 18 years old who came to the ER a few days after bad air exposures. And the really astounding thing was that, that these diagnoses went up so high. A 210% increase in personality disorder, 104% increase in schizophrenia in the presence of or after exposure to increased PM 2.5, and a 31% increase in bipolar disorder. So, you know, this is a tragedy, really. Next slide, please. Actually, similar results were found in Denmark. It's always good to have your findings duplicated by people in other environments. This is the brain on smog. Ozone and PM 2.5 are major components of smog. This study was published in the Atlantic, the pictures from a study published in 2019. And they reported autopsies on children and young adults who'd been killed in accidents. The pathologists found early markers of Alzheimer's disease in 40% of those who had lived in places with high levels of air pollution, and no markers of early onset Alzheimer's disease in people who had breathed clean air. Kids who lived in the most polluted places and also carried a gene that was linked to early onset Alzheimer's disease had short-term memory loss and IQ points 10 points lower than their peers. This was reported by Christina Marusik in part of a 5-part series about pollution and how it affects mental health. I had no idea of that until recently. I'm glad I'm trying to study these things. Next slide, please. We mentioned ground level ozone before. Susan mentioned it. And I just state again, because nitrogen oxide and volatile organic compounds are coming from these refineries. And when they interact with sunlight, ozone is formed. This gets trapped in the ground area around, well, where we're walking and breathing when there's an inversion. This often happens in Pittsburgh and can happen anyplace else too, when the heat levels in the atmosphere will trap this ground level ozone where we're breathing it. It does cause inflammation of the lungs and a decrement of function without you noticing anything. You may not have any symptoms, but your lungs are being injured and they reduce immunity to bacterial infections. Repeat exposure can cause permanent lung injury, and you don't even know it until you're already damaged so much you can't recover. What else did I want to say? Oh, the FDA mandates that ground level ozone should be no higher than 0.05 parts per million, but really no exposure to ozone is safe. Exposure to ozone and particulate pollution have been linked to premature death, damage to respiratory and cardiovascular systems, worsened mental health and neurologic function, as I just gave some details, decreased fertility, low birth rate, increased cancer, worse immune function, and worse outcomes from infectious diseases, which we've certainly seen in the case of COVID-19. It sounds like I'm repeating myself. So I'll go to the next one, next slide. I am repeating myself because all the different air pollutants cause disease. The BTEX compounds are basically volatile organic compounds. Ethylbenzene is a liquid, but it becomes a gas frequently in the environment. And benzene is one I wanted to return to because really there's quite a bit of information about that. So I'll go to the next slide. This study was done in the United Kingdom, and it studied countries in Europe. It studied Israel, United States, and Taiwan, 16 different places. It's included 187,000 people living within 3 miles of a refinery, storage facility, or manufacturer of commercial chemicals. Because, as we said before, we can't predict health outcomes for any one individual, it's necessary to look at so many people over a longer interval of time. And you can see, I highlighted the worst outcome that they found. Risk of developing leukemia is increased by 30%. That's really not very good. Of course, it's not good. Nobody wants to be sick. The government of California notes that individuals who live closer to oil refineries are more likely to develop health disorders, even if they live 10 miles away. So it's not like, oh, I live 3.5 miles away and I don't have any risk. I still have an increased risk, but it's not quite so much. And even if I live 15 miles away, I probably have an increased risk. The air takes the toxins sometimes for hundreds of miles. Certainly that's the case with PM 2.5. I better go to the next slide. This was really what is known about exposure to benzene. It causes all these things. When you can smell it, the olfactory threshold is 5 parts per million. 50 to 100 parts per million brings symptoms of fatigue and headache. 3,000 parts per million for over 30 minutes can bring convulsions. So these things happen over time. We may not, like liver damage, memory loss, nerve damage. We don't really know what we've been exposed to. But just yesterday, I spoke with a man who said he had a bad liver because of his exposure to benzene.
What are you pausing?
I said, where did you get that exposure? Do you know? He said, yeah, the creek that I swam in as a child, the floor cleaning work that I did, and the work that I did in printing industry. So, you know, it happens for many different causes, but you don't want to have one close to you if you can help it. Next slide, please. We said people look healthy. We can't predict their healthcare outcome, but we know because of work that Marissa and her colleagues did, that this family has metabolites of those BTEC compounds in their blood, in the breath they exhale. They live near a fracking well. So there's not many fracking wells in your vicinity, but the compounds that come through the pipes that would have been expelled in those compressor stations, they still have some of these pollutants in them. Next slide, please. And down in Washington County, which is the same place that family lives, the children did develop cancer. One of the 3 died. The one who has no hair because he's been getting a lot, or she has been getting a lot of chemotherapy. It took a long time to make this association, since 2008. Next slide, please. Next view, please. Well, I'll just put this here because this is very important in the long run, but I better go to the next view because I've taken up too much time. Fracking does drive climate change. 40 years from now, our children will live in a world that's shaped by our choices. I know I've made a lot of bad choices in the past. Maybe that's part of the reason I can't speak as well now as I did 20 years ago, and then I cough an awful lot. But I try to help people understand the importance of the choices that we're making. Next slide, please. Ned Ketcher is this gentleman on the far left in the blue suit, is talking to Governor Wolf about those problems in Washington County and trying to get support for studies of this. When we first learned about these things, and even a few years ago, there was no real data for the healthcare providers to use to say, oh, I think this person is suffering from asthma or from leukemia or from something else because of their toxic exposures. It's a difficult jump to make, but it's very likely to be true. So next slide, please. So I have to thank Ned for being such a good Ned Katire, is how he says his name. I have to thank him for being such a good role model for me. He's been involved in all of these groups over many more years than I have been involved. I've only been involved a short time. I think it's very interesting. Next slide, please, or you might find it helpful to go to some of these websites and get more information also about the exposures that some people have, about where the air pollution migrates, and other aspects of environmental health. So thank you very much. I hope I have been able to shed a little bit of light on the health risks from living near petrochemical industrial facilities.
Thank you so much, Barbara. Sorry, I didn't mean to speak.
Oh, you're welcome. I wanted to go back. I wanted to go back to you, Kristen.
All right. Thank you so much. And we'll share out the links that Barbara shared on her last slide for all of those resources. We'll send a follow-up email to everyone who registered with that information. Now we're going to turn to the Q&A portion of our program. And we have two monitors tonight. We've been collecting your questions out of the chat and kind of collating them so that we can present them to our speakers. So we'll be reading your questions. If we feel something needs clarification, we'll call on you, but we're doing this to kind of quickly get through as many questions as we can. If we don't have an answer for a question, we do have a group of college students who have offered to do some research for us. So we will take your questions down and do our best to research them and come up with an answer. And with that, I would like to turn it over to Melinda Krokuris from PA Interfaith Power and Light, and Brian Dugas from the Unitarian Universalist Church.
Thank you, Kristen, and thank you to all of our speakers. I'm Melinda Krokus, and I'm a board member, vice president of the board of Pennsylvania Interfaith Power and Light. We are an interfaith climate action organization, and we work through education. We work through bringing people out into nature and kind of reestablishing, rekindling their connection and love for nature and the divine, and advocacy. And that's partly why we're here today, teamed up with the others. Brian, did you want to introduce?
My name is Brian Dugas. I'm the president of the Board of Trustees of the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Wyoming Valley. We're in Kingston Township, up by Francis Slocum State Park. We're active in social justice and environmental issues, and that's why I'm here.
Okay, so we've collected your questions, and you can continue to write your questions in the chat, and we'll try to see if we can get to them. We've had quite a few already. But we'll start with Rick Williams' question. How would the fracked gas be transported to the site? How would produced gasoline then be transported to the markets? So this is, I don't know if it's for Susan or Scott.
I'll take this one. It's probably more economically feasible to get the gas in and out via pipeline. Now, we don't know at this process, and we're going to be honest, we don't know what their plan is so far. We know that the Nanaco Bridge needs to be expanded, and that's very important for this plant to be built as far as truck traffic goes. But as far as what's going to happen, I'm not 100% sure. I would think that they would put a pipeline in to get the natural gas from the pipeline to the plant, and then once the gasoline is processed and made into a product, we're not sure if they're going to use trucks to get that out or not. They also are going to use methane from landfills. I don't think you can put a pipeline from a landfill to this plant, so I would think that would probably be trucked in as well. So my guess is maybe a pipeline for the natural gas to come in, and trucks to get the products out at this point. But it's not 100% certain on that.
Okay, thank you, Scott.
So maybe I could chime in on this question myself. We had a meeting with Representative Aaron Coffer this week, and that was one of the questions that came up. And his view on it is that there will be no new pipelines, only upgrades to existing pipelines, that the principal way that is going to be moved is through rail and some trucking. So
Okay.
that's the latest that we have.
All right. Do you know, Scott, I believe probably this question from Alex Otorto and Liz Glunt. They had a similar question to the new pipeline infrastructure, but they also are asking, will there be compressor stations and will any of it require eminent domain for the facility itself?
The Earth Conservancy owns most of the property. There are some other properties around it that would probably be bought from the property owners. Like I said, the pipeline issue, I don't know what the situation with that is going to be. There has to be a pipe, if they're going to pipeline the gas in, they have to put a pipeline in. There is no pipeline to that area. So they would have to do that. It's eminent domain is only done if it's in the interstate pipeline. If it goes from, say, New Jersey to Pennsylvania, they could take eminent domain. If a property owner doesn't want to sell their land, they can take it. But I don't believe that this would be an eminent domain issue. I think they probably, the owners of the land would probably be glad to sell it and get rid of it for the project.
Okay. Actually, building on that question, then, Scott, if they're looking to get rid of the land, are there any alternative uses for the site that can be considered that can use renewable resources to keep us resilient in energy production and transportation as we transition away from fossil fuel? Is there light manufacturing, other projects that might have been proposed here or brought by the legislators, like the Nacero plant?
This is actually the third type of petrochemical processing plant that was proposed for this particular area. It changed over time, and now it became this Nacero plant has been the last formation. I would love to see Pennsylvania become a leader in solar power technology. It's a big area. It's 3,000 acres. It could certainly be used for a solar farm. There was another recent, some type of bioenergy plant that's being built. It's almost like a stacked on top of each other sort of plant that's being proposed for the area, which is a good thing. So there are a lot of things we can do other than put a fossil fuel to a fossil fuel plant so near where people live.
I think you're talking about the vertical gardens, actually, that
Yes.
are being proposed. Yeah. So there are other possibilities for this place to be both economically and ecologically sustainable and moving forward. Thank you. How about, we have another question here. When will briefings be held from the township and Nacero officials? Because this planning process has been going on for, it appears, a couple of years. So when will is there a time projected to hear from the Nacero officials or the legislators directly with the community about this?
We've been hearing from John Udicek that there's going to be a public information event from Nacero and himself, but they haven't announced anything.
Okay.
Some of you that are involved in the process, could you tell us when they're supposed to happen? Does it happen during the permit process, as what I understood Susan is saying?
Susan, the question is, is when would Nacero actually engage with the community during the permit process?
Yeah, I believe so.
Okay.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. We would think that they would want to have some sort of information session.
Yeah, and they haven't done any, as far as I know, they haven't done any community forums or anything.
Okay.
Yeah. So Scott, in your videos, the township was having meetings. Was that happening during the permit process?
Yes, that was actually the zoning. What you saw there was the zoning board meeting to permit this plant. And what had happened was Governor Tom Corbett was pushing a law at the time saying that natural gas activities superseded all local zoning ordinances. So they said in the video, well, even if we say no to this, it's going to get overridden and the plant's going to happen, so we might as well vote yes, and they voted yes. Well, what happened very shortly after that, they sued Tom Corbett, and they sued that law, and it was deemed unconstitutional, so it was wiped off the books. They could have said no, and that no would have stayed, and they could have stopped that the building and that station, but they didn't.
Thank you. Actually, building on that as well, especially in the question prior to that about other possibilities here, Marin Cook just asked a question, and I'm just going to bring that up because it connects well here for everyone to keep in mind when these briefings may actually happen. She asked, is there a local reimagine initiative in this region? That's their whole philosophy. What else would we rather see here? And in fact, I was going to mention this later for everyone to take a look at Reimagine Appalachia. It's a project that involves Ohio, Pennsylvania, West Virginia, with these very questions. And if we could have a project of Reimagine NEPA in the way that we would want to see it and leave it for, as Barbara mentioned, make choices that will leave it for our descendants, healthy choices for a healthy future. Stephanie, I want to go to Stephanie Bobak's questions though, because she lives directly in front of the build site. So I want to give kind of voice to her questions. She said, I live directly in front of the build site. I have several questions about what has happened at these previous locations. For homeowners that suffer foundation damage, has Nacero compensated homeowners? Did any of those homeowners near the explosion shown in the video seek medical treatment? And if so, was there any diagnosis that was directly attributed to the explosion? Now, the first one, I think we would say Nacero doesn't have a lot of history with actually functioning plants yet. The only functioning plant is the one in Turkmenistan, I believe. Is that right, Scott and Kristen?
Yes, to my knowledge. Yeah, Nacero hasn't built anything yet. The plant that you saw in the first video was made by Chief Gas and Oil. And they have since sold that plant to 3 different companies after that. Now I think PVR Partners is the Energy Transfer Partners is the current owner of it. But they did sue Chief, even though at the time I think PVR Partners owned it. So they sued Chief and they got a settlement, but they can't say what the settlement was. And that money they use for the medical expenses and things like that, and several of them moved out, so I'm sure they used their money to buy homes elsewhere.
Okay.
So Nacero, we have no history of them with anything.
Okay. And another one of these questions: how will this plant differ from the UGI plant in the non-residential area between West Nanticoke and Hunlock Creek? Or is anyone here familiar with the UGI plant in that area?
I believe that is an electrical plant that uses natural gas.
Okay.
It's far removed from any homes in the area. It's pretty far away, so it doesn't cause quite as many issues.
Okay.
It used to be a coal energy plant, but they converted over to natural gas.
Are there any, and this is actually probably a good question if Nacero actually has a briefing of any sort, but I'll ask it here too. Are there any extra protections taken because of the proximity to the nuclear power plant just downriver? As Newport Township residents, we all have iodine pills in our freezers in case of an accident in Berwick. Should there be an accident in Berwick, what impact would that have on a natural gas plant within 15 miles? there and within Stephanie's own backyard.
I don't think we can answer that question, but ironically, this plant had two proposed locations, and the other proposed location was next to the new gas plant that they built next to the nuclear power plant. So they were either considering Salem Township or Newport Township for this plant, and then they announced that it was going to be at Newport Township. Okay. So they were actually going to put this plant almost right next door to the nuclear power plant.
Okay. And I'm just going to continue with this. Also, this is about jobs. I think it's a good question. Stephanie has read how many jobs it's supposed to create. We know that there are going to be a slew, couple of thousand or a few thousand initial construction jobs, and then about 300 or so that they said would be permanent jobs. She's mentioned, but most of these are temporary. Of those that will be at the plant, has Nacero said if there will be specialized jobs needing certification, meaning would it be employing people from the area or people from outside who have other skills, professional skills, and also how many jobs will be available to residents in the area versus promoting existing employees from other locations?
I'll chime in again. I think that's a question only Nacero can answer.
Okay, so just at least these are the kinds of questions, though, I think, Stephanie, that you would bring to the commissioners meeting, to Nacero information meeting. These are the kinds of questions that open up the newspaper article saying 4,000 jobs and 300 jobs, but you need to press always for the details of what that means.
So I'd like to add here that a lot of this information was talked about by Representative Coffer. Mm-hmm. And after the meeting, he said that he did reach out to the Nacero plants, to the Nacero company, for them to provide more information, because he understood that there was a lack of information here. And he said he has reached out. So there should be an expectation here that they come up here and start talking about what's going on and what the plant looks like and the details.
Ryan, I can't see you. I don't know if I'm the only one. But
Ryan is actually on, he's talking from my office, but his video should be on from his tablet. So you can see him in a different
I don't see him. Do other people see him?
Do you see me?
I don't. I can see Ryan. He's in a different square.
Oh, okay.
Just
okay. I'm only seeing the speaker on the main screen.
Oh, okay. I'm in gallery view, so I can see it. Yeah.
I'm here. I'm not just a voice.
So I did have a request for Susan. I don't know if you saw it in the chat could you share a link to the cancellation notice for the Nacero project proposed in Arizona in the Kingman facility? I don't know if we have that or if that's possible.
Give me a moment. I can share a news article.
Okay.
I can try to look as well, Susan. Why? I think the two of us together might find it.
Okay. Now, is this the cancellation notice for the Kingman facility? I thought the Kingman facility is the one that was actually going to happen.
This is for a separate facility in Casa Grande, Arizona.
Okay, which is south. It's outside of Phoenix. Kingman, actually, I'm speaking as if everyone knows where these places are in Arizona. Kingman is in the northwestern corner of Arizona. Casa Grande is going to be just south of Phoenix, I believe, which is going to be in kind of more south central Arizona. So they're far away from each other in two different projects. So I will continue actually with the questions then here. Do we have a sense of, let's see. Where am I going to go? Actually, I'll ask, so Dean Marshall asks a question about a statement, and then is he correct in this assumption? So this company is eager to attract investors and actually build this plant in the Texas site as models. The plan is to build as many of these behemoths as possible, sell them to other companies, and make a huge profit. Meanwhile, the new, as yet unknown owners would be legally liable for any damages that might arise. Am I correct in this assumption? Scott, do you?
That's a question for the Nacero attorneys as well. Yeah, that's
a level of detail that we just haven't been privy to.
Like I said, the video that I showed, the residents in the area sued the original builder of the plant, even after it was sold. So they were responsible for paying the litigation and the settlement. But I'm not sure if that's going to be the same in this case.
Mm-hmm. So Bobby Hughes has a question. Have they even considered the nature of the historic underground mining legacy of the anthracite that has been mined in southern Wyoming Valley? The potential for mine subsidence and the need for a thorough feasibility study of the underground mine pools that underlies the Newport Creek watershed and several communities within the project area has not been completed to my knowledge. And he gives the here a web link for an inventory of surface and underground mine maps here. Do we know anything about their feasibility studies with regard to the anthracite mining historically?
Well, Bob is the most foremost expert on mining in the region. I would hope that he would ask for that and get that and have that done. That needs to be done.
Yeah.
But again, we don't know what Nacero's plan is because they're not. They haven't had any public forums yet that people can ask these questions. We have a couple more minutes left. Jay has asked a question. How can turning one form of gas into another be green if the end result is still burning fossil fuel and driving up the demand for more fracked gas?
It's not green.
Yeah. It's not green. You can't say that these are green jobs because like the permit, the sister company, their permit says that if we do the same thing that they're doing in Texas, this plant will be the third largest emitter of CO2 and greenhouse gases in the state. And you cannot say that that is a green job, period.
I would also suggest to read, I thought, when someone reached out to the Union of Concerned Scientists to kind of, they're on the Nacero Facebook page, I think there's a link up there for that letter back that they wrote. And they give a nice thorough explanation of the process that Susan explained to us and why in the end this is not necessarily as good as, again, the first announcement of it makes it seem like. Scott, is that, maybe we can pin it up a little bit again from on the Facebook page toward the top for people to go to.
Sure, I'll put some more information up there.
And could I add here that another product that is supposed to be coming out of this factory is green and blue ammonia gas, which is different from the gasoline that we were talking about. That's something that also came out of that meeting.
Okay. All right. And Claudia has just that what we've heard about the announcement, as she's saying, is called greenwashing, right? So we want to make everything look very green and good for the future. And that's why it's necessary to ask so many of these great questions. Hopefully, so Jeff Kennedy just wrote here, hopefully this is not an overly simplistic question, no such thing. What powers the plant?
So I'm going to have to jump in here again because this sort of caught me by surprise again in this conversation that we had with Representative Kaufman, where he said that he was under the understanding that it would be powered by solar power.
That is what the
that is
design
what he said.
shows.
I'm going to say no more. I was caught by surprise by that. I don't understand how solar power could provide enough energy for a factory like that, but that is what his understanding was.
Tonier actually is also asking what? And in some of the Nacero plans, you see the pictures of the plants. That's what they show. And I think Penwell in the middle of Texas in a big open field may be using some solar power. I'm not sure the feasibility of that here. This plant is has a very different, it's in a very different footprint than the Texas. And
I think it's electricity that they're going to use.
Well,
Yeah.
I would say it's a combination of both electricity and solar.
That would be my guess. What was I going to say? I just want to check the questions over here. There's another comment in here that says the newspaper said they are also in negotiations with UGI to power the plant. So we'll see. Again, these are all very good questions for any sort of information meeting that is going to be had with Nacero and the township commissioners. I did want to ask Jackie Baker, again, I don't want to put you on the spot, so please feel free to decline. You had, in the beginning of the Q&A in the chat, described your experience in Susquehanna County. And I wanted to ask you, from your experience in Susquehanna County with the fracking companies coming in, what questions or what actions would you advise the people in Newport Township to do and to ask their commissioners in Nacero? Again, coming out of Scott has shared with us many people's, but if you would want to share maybe some of your experiential wisdom.
Who?
That was Jackie Baker. I don't know if she's still here or not. It was early on in the chat. Maybe she's not here. Okay, we are at just after 9 o'clock. I know we were planning on ending about now. There are a couple of other questions. I think we've hit on most of thematically the main ones that might have been repeated. Alex asks again, a very important question. How will the lights from this plant affect the Garden Drive-In movie theater? We'll need someone very local probably to answer that question.
I would, the Garden Drive-In is on the other side of the river.
Okay.
So I'm not sure if it will or not.
Yeah.
But that's just a guess. It's on the other side of the river.
Hi, it's Stephanie in Newport Township.
Okay, Stephanie.
Hi. We're actually about a mile and a quarter up from LCC. About a quarter of a mile up from our bar, for those familiar with the area. And that is where, if you're familiar with the Prospect Street roundabout, that is where the entrance to the industrial park that the proposed plant would be in is. So it is not in West Nanacoke, it is in Alden, technically.
All right, thank you, Stephanie. Oh, Jackie had to leave. Thank you, Alyssa. Is there a map of where the plant will be located?
Trying to get one.
Yeah, thanks, Charlotte. Yes, we have been trying to get one. A clear indication.
Hey, this is Alex Latordo. I just wanted to offer my help. I used to work for Energy Justice Network, Shale Gas Program Coordinator, and I live local and worked on the Jessup power plant fight and the Salem power plant fight on either side of the proposed area. So I'm listening, and thank you for all your hard work.
Thank you, Alex. I went in that area. Oh, there was another question. Actually, I did want to ask about the fire, and I don't know if Jim is here. Stephanie had asked about if donations are made to local fire departments. Are these departments outfitted with anything extra they would need to fight fires at facilities of this magnitude?
They would have to be trained and provided probably a different set of equipment to handle something like this. And if Jim is still on the call, he can possibly answer that.
I think I remember in your video, Scott, that as far as that I was going to say compression plant, but it wasn't.
It's a glycol dehydration station.
Dehydration,
yes. It's kind of half of a compressor station. They put the other half up the road even further.
Okay, so the dehydration station there, it seemed like the firemen couldn't actually, they weren't trained, even though this was in their jurisdiction.
They weren't allowed on the property.
Yeah.
Yeah, they didn't, they weren't trained. There was no safety program involved with this before the explosions went off. And they just basically sat there until the noise subsided, and then they told the people to get back in their homes. It's funny because when the first explosion happened, it's not an explosion, but it's a gas release. Mm-hmm. I went around and gave my cards out to people, to talk to people, and nobody wanted to go on camera and talk about it. After the second one happened, literally it stopped at 3:00 in the morning. I got a phone call from one of the residents at 3:00 in the morning saying to me, I wanted to call you, but I couldn't hear anything. I had to wait for it to stop. What do I do? And this is 3:00 in the morning, the night before Thanksgiving. And, you know, all I could tell him was call 911. And it was a scary situation for those people. And those releases happen all the time, from faulty valves, from testing. That particular 45-minute release released 5.3 million cubic feet of methane into the atmosphere, and methane is almost 83 times more potent a greenhouse gas than CO2 is.
Yeah,
that's a lot.
It's a lot. Yeah. I want to be respectful of the time, and if people have a question that they don't feel was asked, if I've missed it along the way, please feel free at this point then to maybe unmute yourself or write it in the chat again so I can see it come up right away and we will address it. Otherwise, I think we've addressed most of the questions that were asked.
Can I quickly just announce the name of the Facebook page where people can go? Yes. And ask questions? It's called the Luzerne County Nacero Fracked Gas to Gasoline Refinery. I know that's a long name. Luzerne County Nacero Fracked Gas to Gasoline Refinery. And there's a lot of information on that page.
Yeah, maybe Kristen can put that link in the chat. And again, I wanted to reiterate to keep the questions flowing, to look for more information sessions, to keep pressing for details to all of the good questions. We will be in touch with all of you as we learn things, posting it to the Facebook page. And again, to leave this also thinking about reimagining NEPA, about the and the kind of place we want to live in, and what we want to leave for the future. As Barbara and Susan and Scott and Kristen and all of us here have worked hard to share this with you with that in mind.
Thank you so much, Melinda and Brian and Susan and Barbara, and of course, Scott. Very quickly, I don't want to keep everybody for a long time, but we do have a few just next steps. Where do we go from here? So I'm just going to share my screen very quickly. And so what can you do to help? Well, you can call your state senator. You can call your state representative. Projects like this are financed by tax credits often given by governments, and this one is no different. It's being financed by a pretty hefty tax credit of about $6.5 billion every year for 25 years. You can also attend meetings. You can attend your township supervisor's meeting in Newport Township. You can go to the Luzerne County Redevelopment Authority meetings. They are about to engage the services of a law firm to start issuing bonds to help finance infrastructure projects around this refinery. Again, using the taxpayers' money to do that. You can also go to the county council meetings or keep abreast of what's going on at the county council. They will most likely have to have some meetings around rezoning around this issue to make this type of facility possible. We also have a petition that is live that you can sign, and we have a email sign up list so you can join our campaign. We'll keep you updated about events, other forums that we're going to do. We're hoping in the spring that we can do another forum similar to this one, but in person, so that we can actually all get together and meet each other. I will put those links for that information in the chat. And as I mentioned, we will follow up on this forum with an email to provide you with information and resources from everything that we shared tonight. So thank you so much for sticking with us. I know this was a longer Zoom call, but I think it was well worth it. If any of the reporters are still on the call and you would like to get a quote from the speakers or any of the organizers, please feel free to just let us know that. We will stick around. And with that, thank you so much, everybody, and have a wonderful night.